Afternoon, everybody. Steve, I appreciate the very long introduction. It's getting late in the day. I appreciate IDAM's invitation to FirstNet for somebody to speak. Happy to be here. We do have a kind of a long history going back to 9/11, and it's been an interesting one. I want to start out by saying, first of all, that, you know, the focus of our effort in public safety to build a broadband network and the publicity around it has centered primarily around the network itself. But as anybody can tell you, and certainly everybody in this room knows, that you can build a network, but if you don't have the applications to run on that network, the network doesn't have a lot of value to you. So FirstNet's effort is multi-pronged. It is focused not just on how to build this network and how that should operate and how that should be operated, but it's also focused on applications. You know, how does that happen? You know, what's the right approach to that? So that's something that's being well thought out. I know, and just talked to him briefly, Harlan McEwen, who's sitting right up here in front, who is the chair of our Public Safety Advisory Committee for FirstNet, has raised this issue a number of times, that how do we do this in a way that it makes sense from an application perspective? Now, I'm not an applications expert. I don't pretend to be. We'll talk at kind of a high level. This deck has a lot of information on it that you're going to see today. We're going to make that available to you. It's been loaded on the laptop. Steve, we have no issue with you sharing it with the members of your institute. There's a lot of things that drill down into not only the network side, but also the application side. I'm not going to have the time to go through a 50-page deck with you today, obviously, but I want to touch on these things at a high level. And again, I want to make this deck available for you to look at so that you can kind of use it for food for thought on how FirstNet is going to approach this. So, First Responder Network Authority. We hold the license to 20 megahertz of prime real estate spectrum in the 700 band. Our responsibility is, quite frankly, to build and deploy and help to maintain and operate a public safety grade broadband network. If you look at the history of commercial networks, and this is not a criticism of them, they are built to a different standard than public safety networks, quite frankly. So what we're looking to do, and again, if you look at the situation during Hurricane Sandy, where commercial networks struggled to maintain service and in some cases simply couldn't, public safety networks, although in a very different technology, land mobile radio, survived and operated while the commercial networks did not. So, you know, the goal here is to take the lessons learned from 70 plus years of land mobile radio work and apply them as appropriate to the solution for the build out of this network, so that when you have a Sandy and you have network issues, or when you have a Boston Marathon type situation where networks are up and operating but are completely congested, public safety's network will perform in a fashion very similar to the way our land mobile radio networks perform from a survivability and a high availability perspective. And that's ultimately, as simply as I can state it to you, at least from my mind, how we want to see this rolled out. So, you know, we've been busy. We started up as a board with FirstNet. The legislation was passed almost now 2 years ago. This February will be 2 years. We've been starting to make some real progress, I would say, over the last 8 months or so. One of the frustrations for us was we were created by federal legislation, and a board was created, a board was instituted with a 15-member board, and we didn't have a single employee. So board members had to do double duty for quite some time in order to try to get some progress going. But the good news is, in July, in April, we named our general manager. In July, our deputy general manager. We've brought on some key personnel. We now have a general counsel. And I was over at the offices of the NTIA today. And, you know, we're starting to look like an organization. We probably have about 30 or 40 employees at this point. We are in a search for some more of a high level. Right now, we're in the process of trying to identify a chief technology officer for FirstNet. That's going fairly well. But quite frankly, you know, working within the federal structure, it does take time to get this done. But I'm comfortable, based on what I'm seeing now, that we are making the kind of progress that will ultimately get us where we need to be. We approved an operational budget of $194 million back in the, I believe it was the August 2013 meeting for FirstNet. Now, you know, that's a one-year operational budget. There's no way we're going to come close to spending that money. But, you know, we wanted to put that in place so that we could continue forward with the progress that we need to be an effective organization. Again, as I mentioned to you earlier, the goal here ultimately is to build a public safety broadband network. What does that mean to me? It means that this is a network that will have coverage characteristics very similar to land mobile radio, that it will have survivability characteristics like land mobile radio, and that it will be dedicated to public safety like the land mobile radio public safety networks are today. As we do that, we want to be careful about how we spend money. You know, we have been allocated ultimately $7 billion. $2 million, we have borrowing authority for $2 billion up front with a commitment of another $5 billion through voluntary incentivized auctions of other spectrum. Now, you know, none of that has happened yet, but, you know, I think we're cautiously optimistic that we will eventually get that money. That said, I don't believe that $7 billion is going to get this network built nationwide in a fashion that public safety ultimately will expect, but it will certainly get us started in the right direction. This is a slide developed by our general manager, Bill D'Agostino, who, by the way, I think is an excellent general manager. I think he was a great choice. I think Harlan would agree with me that he is a guy that public safety has confidence in. This slide is kind of his six-point plan to get us not up and running, but get us going. And so it starts along the bottom with an organizational foundation. So the $194 million today is there, you know, to keep the lights on, to get us set up at our headquarters in Reston, Virginia, ultimately. Right now, we're borrowing offices at the Department of Commerce, NTIA, for staffing, for travel, for planning, all the things that we need to do just as an organization to get up and running to do the other things that we need to do. And then we go to his five-part plan, which starts with networking partners. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's got a lot of potential and options capabilities to it. What does that mean? Does it mean only partnering with commercial carriers? No, it does not. It could mean that. It could mean partnering with other more traditional public safety corporations. It could mean partnering with financial backers that help us build the network. That is kind of an open-ended thing, but that's one of the main components of Bill's focus right now for FirstNet's, the FirstNet organization. Mandates. Quite frankly, the legislation requires us to do certain things. One of the most important things it requires us to do and that we need to do is outreach. I think Bill has done a tremendous job of expanding the outreach capability of FirstNet. I think the states initially, when we engaged with them, were a little concerned that maybe they weren't going to get listened to like they should. I don't think that's the case. I think they are. I think they're getting more and more comfortable with the outreach that we're doing with them. I think they see the relationship with the PSAC the Public Safety Advisory Committee blossoming into an effective resource for FirstNet. And so these things, are mandated by law. We have to do this outreach to the states. We have to engage with single points of contact in the states, and we're doing that. And there are several other mandates in there. I'm not going to go through the details of all of them, but these things have to get done in order for us to accomplish our mission. They are required by the statute. Another focus of his area are the early movers, or the BTOP grantees, and those can not necessarily the same thing. We have NTI grants in 7 locations to build the broadband network. FirstNet, through Sue Swenson, one of our board members, has been successful in negotiating lease agreements with 4 of those 7. I think we're happy about that. We certainly would have liked to have been able to make deals with all 7, but quite frankly, I wasn't sure that we'd even get to 4, but we are doing that. So we're engaged with them, the city of Los Angeles, Adams County, Harris County in Texas, and the state of New Mexico. I think the goal there, and quite frankly, in other places we'd like to do this, is to get some early adopters. There are some states, quite frankly, out there that are much further ahead than other states in their planning for FirstNet and in their desire to get up and running on FirstNet. So I think, from our perspective, that it is in FirstNet's interest and public safety's interest to start building some of these networks, start experimenting and understanding what works, what doesn't work, and use those lessons learned as we move forward with the broader build-out of the network. Another key component of Bill's plan is the mobile network concepts. And again, this is kind of a multi-layered tool. It's not going to be one size fits all. So in cities like New York, Chicago, Washington, D.C., you'll have fixed infrastructure for this network, obviously, like you do with the typical land mobile radio networks or the commercial networks. But in some areas of the country, that simply is not going to be a viable solution, and it doesn't make sense. So we'll be looking at multi-layered solutions. For example, we'll be looking at satellite components to the FirstNet solution. We'll be looking for vehicle-mounted solutions, mobile solutions. We'll be looking for expanded distance solutions based on the network locations that are not typically classically found in commercial networks, but we'll probably utilize here. So we're looking at a lot of different ways of doing this. We just simply can't put infrastructure in the middle of Yellowstone Park. It's just not going to happen. So, but the fact that nobody lives there doesn't mean that public safety doesn't operate there. Commercial networks build where the customers are. Public safety has to build where public safety has to go. And there might not be anybody living there, but you still have to fight that forest fire. So satellite solutions, even drone capability to get a small area network set up based on that and the vehicles and vehicles within a certain radius, so that at least you would have that capability in a confined area, but still have a communications capability. So these are the types of things that Bill and his team are thinking of that we think will be effective. The 5th component of his initial plan for 2014 is a focus on wireless devices. And FirstNet issued an RFI some time ago for that. There were 54 respondents to that. We're going through that information now, and we want to learn what that means for us. Does that mean, people using their personal devices? Sure, it could. Does it mean that, for firefighters and officers on patrol, we need ruggedized devices that are dedicated for the public safety purpose? Absolutely. So there'll be a whole gamut of devices used on this network, from bringing your own to dedicated public safety and specialized public safety equipment that will operate on the FirstNet network. Again, just some dates for you on what we've done. The RFIs that were issued. questions are due, answers published, responses due, review responses are in progress. And again, this is all towards a goal of learning, what the vendor community is thinking about this, engaging with them and understanding what they think will work, but at the same time working with our public safety partners, in particular the PSAC, to understand what public safety's requirements are going to be and what the nature of the equipment and the network is going to look like, and the applications for that matter. Network build considerations. It's a big country, and we're obligated in one way or another of covering 100% of the United States. This is not a situation where we go where the folks are. That's a commercial model. We need to be able to build where public safety has to operate. 100% is quite an aggressive goal, but quite frankly, that's the way we have to view it. And so the focus of FirstNet is to come up with a multi-layered solution, like I described earlier, of network connectivity that will allow us to accomplish that mission. Talked about build to public safety standards. It's got to be redundant, diverse, hardened, in the same way we build our land mobile radio networks. The one thing that, and by the way, by legislation, FirstNet is mandated to do, is to build the core of this. We will build the core of this network. But let me be clear, if you haven't heard, and I think the message has been getting out better over the last several months, I recognize, based on my experience of 12 years running communications in New York City, that all first response is local. So you're going to need local control of this network. So while FirstNet will be responsible for the core of this effort, ultimately the RAN has to be managed locally. FirstNet is not looking to run this nationwide from end to end, because quite frankly, I don't think they could do it. If you have, and I give an example of a real incident, you look at the SUV bomb scare that occurred back in 2009 in Times Square. There was an effort, obviously run locally, where if you had this network, you'd have the ability to do a whole host of things, run videos, do analysis, operate your bomb robots remotely off this network. The bandwidth for that effort, considering the number of first responders that are going to that coalesced around an incident like that, has to be managed. Because while we have a lot of bandwidth, because we have 20 megahertz, it is not infinite. So FirstNet is not looking to manage that. That will be managed locally by first responders who will decide based on incident management protocols who gets priority for what types of applications will run on the network during an event like that. So that's a critical thing that everyone in this room and in public safety has to understand. Local control is going to be the key to the success of this. And, that's the way we're going to do this. There's nothing else will work. Some of the challenges we face. The legislation also requires us to be financially self-sufficient. We want to ensure that this thing is built out cost effectively. And the only way to do that, in my view, is to leverage as much public safety capability and infrastructure as we possibly can in order to keep our costs down. Now, there's no way we're going to be able to build this using only public safety networks and network sites. We're clearly going to have to partner with commercial site owners, with carriers that own sites, with others that own sites, in order to build out this network. But we want to make that as cost effective as possible. If this gets too expensive, public safety is going to balk at it. The taxpayer will not be able to afford this. So with a limited number of public safety users, we have to figure out a way to make this thing cost effective. By the way, one of the ways you do that is you leverage the value of the spectrum on secondary use for commercial purposes. And again, as long as that is invisible to the public safety users, meaning that we have preemptive priority on the network at all times, I don't think anybody in public safety has any objection to FirstNet generating revenue off of the spectrum in order to maintain and build the network. And I think that's going to be one of the keys to the financial solution that makes this network viable. Talked about the coverage categories already. Different solutions for different areas. Dense urban areas like New York City will have a lot of fixed infrastructure. Wilderness, you're going to be relying on mobile capability, quite frankly, and probably satellite capability. So it will run the gamut from one end to the other, simply because there's just no way we're going to, number one, even if we could afford to build 35 or 40,000 sites, we simply can't build them in certain places. It's just not practical, and nobody's going to let us. Nobody's going to let us build in Yellowstone Park. Again, multiple solutions concept, using various methodologies to create connectivity is the way we're looking at building this. I think it's a good plan. I think it's a good solution, and quite frankly necessary, because you'll have events where even if we build this and harden it through our best efforts, there will be damage to public safety communication sites depending on the type of incident that occurs, like tornadoes. That's where a mobile strategy, the ability to deploy mobile capability, comes into the equation. So that's something that we're simply going to have to be prepared to do and plan to do. Not looking to reinvent the wheel. Public safety several years ago, committed to building in LTE technology. Why? Because it makes sense. That's what the commercial carriers are doing. We want to leverage the R&D there. We want to leverage the economies of scale when it comes to the LTE build-out. Absolutely, positively the way to go, and we will. Again, talked about this. FirstNet will build the core. Mobile network, terrestrial network. Intelligent routing will be a critical part of this. It will look for the network that it's primarily supposed to be on. If it doesn't see it, it'll start looking for other solutions. That's the way we want to see this happen. Again, talked about the economies of scale, commercial standards. Yeah, we're building a public safety network, but that doesn't mean that we want to be a one-off. For too many years, public safety and public safety communications equipment and subscriber devices have almost been, in some cases, prohibitively expensive, simply because we don't have the economies of scale for communications capability that the commercial sector does. So leveraging that will substantially reduce the costs of our infrastructure, quite frankly, I believe, and in particular, our subscriber devices. We talked about the RFI that went out for devices. We are testing things now. We have been loaned some devices that are out in Boulder at NIST. We're looking at that stuff. It's pretty cool, some of the stuff we've seen so far. I'm not going to discuss it because there are non-disclosure agreements, obviously, with the vendors that have lent us equipment. But there's a lot of interest in this, and as we move forward, we'll be testing these and working with the vendor community to ensure that we're getting the types of devices designed in the way that public safety needs them to look and perform. There's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years that this network is going to replace land mobile radio. I don't have a crystal ball. I think the likelihood is high that sometime in the future that a voice capability like land mobile radio will be available on the broadband network. But that's not something that's going to happen anytime soon. So, for those that have heard or suggested that folks don't need to maintain their land mobile radio systems or upgrade their land mobile radio systems, that's simply not the case. Two-way voice is the most critical communications capability available to public safety first responders, and it's not going away anytime soon. So no matter what you've heard or haven't heard, quite frankly, we are, land mobile radio is not going away anytime soon. But again, we do want to kick the tires inside the LTE technology on this network on all kinds of different types of capabilities. And so we'll be trying some voice capabilities early on the network, but that will not be mission critical voice capability. It'll be more one-to-one kind of lower priority communications capability, not dispatch voice capability. That's simply further out and not something that I think is going to happen anytime soon. That said, we'll be exploring also, with the vendor community, hybrid devices, things that work in land mobile radio potentially and also perform on the LTE network. So, it's an interesting study in how this gets done and how it gets built out, how these devices start to look and feel and how they perform. Talked a little bit earlier about outreach. We are establishing 10 regional offices or teams to work through the state points of contact and to work with the cities and states and localities, tribal areas, in order to do the outreach. We feel it's important to get physically out in the field in these 10 locations so this doesn't look and feel like a federal network, that, this is state and local, and we're going to be out there talking to the states, talking to the locals, and understanding their needs and concerns. These 10 regions that we've set up for geographic consistency and convenience align with the FEMA regions. But because they align with the FEMA regions doesn't mean that this is federal or that we are directly affiliated or controlled in any way by FEMA. It's simply a geographic exercise that just makes it easier to liaison with FEMA in those areas where they already have these 10 areas in place. And so we're going to just kind of leverage those relationships that already exist. But no, we're not being run by FEMA. How do you prepare to support FirstNet? Developing deep understanding of how the public safety works, leveraging LTE for cost efficiency, developing rapidly deployable products, continue to participate in our demo network, meeting public safety quality reliability standards, monitor and provide complete responses to our RFI and RFPs. These are the things that we're doing and that we're going to do with the states and in concert with the states and with Harlan and the PSAC in order to be successful. We are not, again, I've said this before, we're not operating in a vacuum here. We're looking to do this so that the states and locals are happy, because quite frankly, at some point here, we have to go to the governors of every state and say, do you want to opt in? By legislation, they have to opt in. And we want to make a compelling argument to them that by working with them and understanding local needs and concerns, that when the time comes for that state to say yes or no, that governor is going to say yes. And not only that, but that public safety within that state will be comfortable with the governor's decision and want to participate on the network with FirstNet. The governor of the state of New York could theoretically opt in on the network, but if the FDNY, the NYPD, Nassau County on Long Island, Suffolk County, Westchester, and other large areas or even rural areas decide that they're not comfortable with the way this network is built and looks and performs, it still won't work, even if the governor did opt in. So we want to make sure that there's public safety buy-in in those states and that the governor is comfortable with that local buy-in, and that we have made, from FirstNet's perspective, a compelling argument to them to utilize this network. All right. I'm going to stop here for a second. We're going to talk a little bit about some other issues that are facing FirstNet, because this deck actually is very extensive. It has a number of other components. We're going to talk about applications at a high level from my perspective in a couple of minutes, but I just want to stop here for a second. Any questions on the things that I've kind of discussed with you so far? Yes?
Do you think FirstNet will get around to look
I think probably, in the next year, as you look at, Bill D'Agostino's 6-point plan that I talked about in a high level, that's part of the focus of what he's doing right now. So I think, from a perspective certainly from the rural perspective, mobility, the ability to have mobile solutions and mobile deployments are going to be key to the success in the less populated, more rural areas. So that's as important as building fixed infrastructures in the larger cities in order to be successful with this. At least that's my perspective on what Bill's, where Bill's headed. Any other questions? Yes?
Why do you anticipate voice being delayed in rollout when, LTE networks support phones in here all the time and voice and data and not true?
Well, when you say delay, define for me delay.
Are you saying, voice is not going to be rolled out?
Well,
Not anytime soon is the question.
well, let me clarify what I said. And so when I say anytime soon, we're talking about a mission-critical one-to-many voice capability that's similar to land mobile radio capability. We don't expect that to be rolled out anytime soon. We expect fairly early on in the rollout to have a voice capability on the network. I think I mentioned it, I discussed it, but let me clarify it for you. What that would entail would be, kind of one-to-one non-mission critical communications capability on the network that would be voice. So no, we will be looking to deploy a voice capability fairly early on, but not mission critical voice in the sense of replacing or mimicking land mobile radio.
Why not?
We simply don't feel that we've seen anything so far that would fit that bill. If somebody presents something to us, we'd be happy to look at it, but realistically, that's something that, even if you were to develop it, let's say over the next 12 or 24 months, or you felt you had developed that capability, that is something that it would have to be tested very carefully, because the bedrock of public safety communications is two-way voice. With all this capability that we need and we're going to create with this network, at the end of the day, the most critical communications capability, in my view, for public safety first responders will always be voice capability. If I'm a cop or a firefighter and I'm in trouble, I'm not texting somebody I need help. I'm getting on voice and I'm screaming for help. We in public safety have to be comfortable that that solution will work as reliably as land mobile radio does today, and that's a technology that has been vetted and perfected to an extent, obviously, over 80 years of trial and error. And I don't see us being able to confirm that we'll be able to trust a mission-critical voice capability on this network that quickly. I just don't see it happening. Because again, it's not just a matter of saying we have it and deploying it and say use it. That's something that has to happen, be thoroughly and extensively tested, and then deployed, and then it has to be trusted by first responders. And that is going to take a considerable amount of time. Harlan, you have a comment?
Well, first of all, what you just said is not generally true. Most of the phones in this room are not using LTE for voice. They're still using 3G voice, okay? So LTE isn't being implemented yet by Verizon and AT&T. They're starting to get ready to do that, but
Why do they know in this area whether or not it isn't?
well, it isn't. Your voice is not using LTE, okay? Number two, the issue that the chief is talking about is that it's a network-centric system. If you can't get a tower, you don't talk to me from your device, okay? You talk to a tower someplace. You can't get to that tower's out of service. I got nothing. I got a brick in my hand. That's the issue. We have to have reliable voice that can talk unit to unit or without a network. This is a network-centric system.
Yes.
So do you see the use of it for standard telephone
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part of
So
it.
the use of, right now, we spend a lot in law enforcement on data network.
Sure.
Right, paying the vendors, but we're also paying for cellular use. So are we also going to transplant those costs so that we'll be using this system for non-emergency on a day-to-day basis, so that maybe we can put more phones in the field that we can put?
Well, you know, I don't know whether I'd characterize them as phones, right? We're talking about a voice capability that's non-mission critical, right? So you know, if the desk lieutenant in a precinct wants to talk to one of the field units rather than send a text message, you know, for whatever reason that the lieutenant wants to do that, you know, we would hopefully have that voice capability on there. But that's, you know, to characterize that as a phone, you know, I don't think it doesn't necessarily replace the need to be able to make a phone call. You know what I mean? So, you know, can you integrate that, you know, through partnerships with commercial carriers? You know, we would hope to be able to do something like that, but we'll have to see how that develops.
And I use phone because I'm trying to reference how we do it today.
Right.
And that's a cost we spend now, and I can see the difficulty would be we'd be transferring that cost to the system.
Right.
But we wouldn't be getting a return income on that necessarily.
Right.
You know, if it was cheaper to stay with the carrier for those calls, stay with the carrier.
Right.
Which wouldn't, yeah.
But again, you know, the goal of this ultimately is to replace, to a large degree, your need to rely on commercial networks, right? And you know, but that's for a number of reasons, and only one of those reasons is financial. You know, the more important reason is, you know, we want to make sure that when we have a critical incident, that we can use those services that we tend to not be able to access on commercial networks, whether it's because the commercial networks were heavily damaged because they're not built to public safety systems, or they're congested, right? Applications update, and again, I'm going to try to stay at a high level at this. There's a lot of detail and a lot of pages here. There's no way we have the time to go through all this in the time allotted, so I apologize. But I just want to talk about some key perspectives on this. Applications and security summary. You know, we're not looking to reinvent the world, the wheel from an applications perspective here. I think the approach is going to be kind of bring your own. If in public safety you have you have an application solution that works for you, we want you to be able to use it on the network. Now, there are certain requirements from a security perspective we're going to have to meet, but I don't think coming out of the gate that we're going to be in a position to dictate certainly don't want to dictate what applications you're going to use, and it's going to be difficult to have only one security standard for the network. So, you know, we're going to take an approach here that will allow, you know, individual agencies like the NYPD, which has a lot of application horsepower as we speak today, to be able to use those applications and leverage them across the network. You know, and we have certain in-house security requirements that we maintain. I think there'll probably be some sort of baseline of different types of security perspectives that FirstNet will look to ensure are there. But again, we're not coming out of the gate trying to dictate to anyone what applications they should use and exactly which particular cybersecurity solution is the right one. I think there'll be more than one right one. We have Terry Takai on our board of directors. She is the CIO for the Department of Defense. We're going to leverage their experience in cybersecurity, hopefully, in order to help us build out this network. That doesn't mean we're going to build to DoD standards. I don't think that's realistic, and I think it's probably cost prohibitive. But we certainly want to learn from them those things that they think are important. The approach on this, again, is going to be we're not applying one set of security requirements. This is going to be kind of a federated model. When I say federated, I didn't say federal. I said federated, okay? That means that, you know, each state may have its own methodologies for application work, for applications, and for security. And as long as they meet minimum criteria to operate on the FirstNet network, that will be acceptable to us. Look, there's different pieces of information, and some of them are more critical. We're not looking for everyday police work to build in security capability that keeps out a foreign government. We're looking to keep out the local burglar, all right, who can listens to our land mobile radio system. So, but that doesn't mean that the Counterterrorism Bureau and the intelligence divisions of various law enforcement organizations wouldn't have a different standard, and do, quite frankly, have a different standard for the security of their data. So, again, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all kind of solution. We're working on an IDAM solution. This, again, this is not a problem that, this is a problem that everybody has and everybody has to tackle. Management solutions for this, the system has to know you, right? Passwords, something, fingerprints, something that identifies you as a public safety user and authorizes you to access information on the network. Again, there are different solutions to this, and we're not looking to dictate one simple solution for that. Again, the difference between local and federal solutions when it comes to application security, that's key to this. And as I said to you before, I'm going to kind of breeze through some of this thing because there's a lot of pages left in this deck, and quite simply, we're not going to have time to get to all of them. Again, one solution isn't going to work. So as we look at what needs to be more secure and what can afford to be less secure, that will help us to make sure that information can pass quickly through the network, and at the same time keeping it secure at some level, depending on the level of security required for the information being passed. I'm going to stop here for a second. Any questions on our approach to applications for the FirstNet network? Really? Or is it you just think I can't answer the question? Is that what it is? Yeah. Okay. Again, I'm sorry. Yes.
In that model, if you're looking at an incident where people from these different jurisdictions with different credentials show up to an incident, how's that work? If you're going into a higher secure environment, for instance, people from less secure, less rigorous, smaller jurisdictions.
Well, again, so I think the way we're going to look at that is, there'll be a baseline level of security that will give you access. I think some of the access that you're talking about is, the reality is that, the higher level of security, as it does today, for me, there's certain information that I don't get access to inside the NYPD, even though I'm at a relatively high rank. There's some stuff that I just can't access, right? So there'll be stuff that you're just not entitled to access. And by the way, by the nature of your function at the scene of an emergency, you don't really need to access. There's somebody there that has access to that, who's dedicated to that issue, and will be able to address it through that information. So, I hope that kind of explains, the approach I think we're going to take here, is that there'll be a baseline, and then depending on the level of your involvement and your level of access to information, the network will govern that. Right?
To take that one step further.
Sure.
That means that the vendors providing applications need to make sure they've implemented a measure that handles that. In other words, if you're going to provide a system that segregates the data among those, so if you're providing a service to law enforcement on scene,
Right.
and you have an expectation of out-of-agency officer showing up in their application, they have to have incorporated that.
Right, and this, this is not a unique, issue to FirstNet. This happens now to us today, even as we access information on as we access information on our wired networks inside public safety. So we kind of have experiences with us already, and we're going to want to look to apply that experience to your wireless capability on this network. So again, password authentication, password requirements, all of these things are things that we face today, and right now, within the NYPD, obviously, a police officer on patrol has a certain level of access to information that obviously doesn't match my level of access to information on the wired network, and it'll be, it would be similar on the wireless network. And again, another reason why, having a set of common standards that FirstNet can help develop, but then giving local control to that so that the local officers decide that. And then when you're out of, when you're out of your jurisdiction or network, help develop standards within FirstNet that allow access for visiting first responders. This is all stuff that we have to work out. And, no one is suggesting that that's going to be easy. That's where the rubber kind of meets the road on this. But it's an effort that we're going to have to perform, right? But again, FirstNet doesn't want to dictate those requirements to public safety. They want to work with public safety so that public safety is comfortable with how those requirements would work. All right. Eye test, couldn't explain that to you if I wanted to, sorry, all right. I wanted to get, there's another section, and again, all of this, and these questions that are on these pages are going to be available to this. This is all stuff that, we're going to be looking for feedback on from not just public safety, but obviously from the vendor community, right? An application store, again, we want to make, FirstNet wants to have its own kind of app store where you can come and share your information. So the NYPD has an application that we developed in-house over the last year or so. It's called ESP. And it's just simple. It's a simplified search tool for officers on patrol. There are more complex tools that detectives use to conduct investigations. But if you wanted to do a field investigation, if you stopped somebody and you wanted to run a name or a plate and get associations and use the analytics of the Real-Time Crime Center, there's a simplified tool called ESP within the NYPD to do that. It's kind of Google for cops, if you wanted to, conceptualize what it is. That's something that I think that, the NYPD we've certainly shown all of this stuff to our applications folks that are working inside FirstNet, and it's information that we want to share. And public safety looks to share those kinds of things over time. So again, the App Store would be set up so that, if NYPD wanted to put something in the App Store so that others could use it, you certainly could. If LA thought they had something, if Davenport, Iowa has something that they want to share that they developed that they think is pretty cool, put it in the App Store. And so it's a place where you can get exposed to the different types of solutions and applications that are public safety focused. We think it's a good concept, and kind of excited about that because it's the other side of this equation. A network without viable applications isn't terribly useful. We talked about a lot of this stuff already. I don't want to go through it. Public safety grade, NIPSTIC has defined these things. Look, public safety, for me, the simplest determination of what public safety grade is, it's got to work under the worst of conditions. And it has to be dedicated to public safety and prioritize public safety on the network. We have asked for a decade, one of the reasons that we've pushed at this effort, we've asked for really over a decade for the commercial carriers to give us preemptive priority on their networks, and they've, on public record, said they simply aren't going to do it. And we understand why they're not going to do it, because they have to serve a larger audience. They're commercially focused. In a crisis, are we going to start pushing, the average citizen off a commercial network so public safety can use it? It doesn't make any sense. That's why we need this dedicated network, and we need priority on this dedicated network so that we don't have to do things like that. And so, I can't really argue with the logic of the commercial carriers as far as their position is concerned. Again, a lot of this stuff we talked about, and again, this presentation is really a conglomeration of 3 different presentations. So having kind of discussed most of the stuff that's in the public first, you know, in the FirstNet Public Safety Grade logic, I think I'll stop here, and I want to see if there are any more questions either on network stuff, timetable, applications stuff, RFIs. Fire away. Go ahead. Excuse me one second. Go ahead. Sorry.
My question's on the RFI that's out there right now, and all the different requirements. I noticed the date did get pushed out towards February. My question is, do you have enough people to be able to even read? If we respond to these RFIs right now, do you have enough staff to review and you know, basically ingest what we're giving you?
My answer to that is, yeah, we're getting there. All right, we're getting there. All right. I think I mentioned at the beginning that you know, I was at the at NTIA today, where you know, we're housed now because you know, we're still in the process of building our headquarters that's going to be out in Virginia, right? And yeah, we're getting there. And so the ability to process information has been key to this, and I think it was one of the things up front that kind of, you know, slowed progress maybe early on in the first 6 to 10 months of our effort, simply because, as I mentioned earlier, you know, we were a board created without an organization or any employees. You know, it's kind of tough to do work. You know, you're a board member, you turn around and do this, and there's nobody standing there. You know what I mean? That means you got to do it. So, so yeah, I think Bill has built a nice structure. I think he's been funded for this effort. You know, his budget for 2014, fiscal 2014, is that $194 million. I'm not suggesting he's going to spend that, but he has spending authority to do what he's got to do. So I'm pretty confident that as we build staff, we'll be able to keep up the pace that we need to make this thing meaningful. Anybody else? Yes.
Does FirstNet have any specific event that you could look to at a timetable for something that says, we've done it, we're on the road?
Timetable for deployment or
To say that you're rolling with steam down the, I mean, this project is moving forward.
well, again, you know, we're in the progress of the process of engaging with the states. That's a big part of this. Getting those 10 regional offices set up and staffed is going to be key to the success of that. He is funded to do that. That's built into that $194 million budget that we approved back in August. So, so I think right now, kind of the answer to your question, and I can't give you a specific timetable, but you know, he wants to move quickly to get those offices up and staffed and engage with the states. Now, again, the legislation requires us. We did 6 regional meetings with the states early on. Those were successful. We got good feedback. But you know, there's also the process of engaging and consulting with each individual state, which is required by legislation. But you know, we just don't want to do that and say, oh, we did it, punch that ticket, and walk away. That's what those 10 regional offices are about. So I think right now, you know, he's trying to develop some sort of plan that allows us to get to, you know, different solutions, you know, this multi-layered potential solution that he's contemplating, right? And you know, and that's far from finalized, right? Obviously, but you know, before we can do that, we need to engage in more detail with the states. We need to dive deeper with them, and those 10 regional offices, I think, are going to be a big component of getting that done in a way that makes sense.
All steps in the process, but I guess I'm looking for is anybody's thought, when's our first cell call kind of event? Or the first
You know what? Hopefully sooner than later. I'm not going to venture a guess at that because, you know, there are factors that weigh on that. You know, what we're allowed to do by legislation, what we're not allowed to do, how that gets interpreted. I will say this, you know, again, we talked about early movers, you know, the BTOP grantees, and quite frankly, there are some states already out there that, excuse me, that are more ready than others to get going, right? And so, you know, I think Virginia, quite frankly, is one of them. You know, but there are others across the country, and then there are other states that are still turning to us and going, "Help us! We really don't understand this. You know, educate us, right?" So some places, you know, are kind of ready, and some places aren't. I would suggest that, and again, I think I said this earlier, that the right way to approach that is to allow some early adoption, right? Does that help at all? Sorry I can't give you a date, all right? Just can't do it. All right? Anybody else? I got some floodlights in my eyes, so if there's an arm out there, please call it out to me. No? All right. Listen, Steve, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll be around a little bit after if anybody's got any questions. Thank you for your time, and thank you for the invite to speak today. Thanks.